This is the Political Dispatch.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Political Dispatch, the podcast where we explore the world's headlines and trace their roots through the past to make sense of the present. I'm Lily Mott.
I'm Tom Spare.
And I'm Sid Kurupati.
Today's episode takes us to India, the world's largest democracy, where a wave of student protests... Okay, Sid's doing quotes already. All right.
Shots have already been fired.
Where a wave of student protests has grown into one of the country's most talked about political movements. What began with anger over a national exam scandal has developed into something much bigger, culminating in the resignation of a government minister and the emergence of an entirely new political party.
Unlike many of our episodes, today's conversation is a little bit different. So rather than interviewing a guest, Lily and I are going to be putting Sid into the hot seat. I feel like we need some sort of dramatic music at this point, but the budget won't be able to cover that one. But as someone who grew up in India and closely follows Indian politics, Sid is going to help us unpack what's happened, why it matters, and what it tells us about the state of Indian democracy.
We'll be asking Sid about the resignation itself, the major political parties involved, how the so-called Cockroach Party emerged from a protest movement, and why it has captured so much public attention in such a short space of time.
We'll also explore how the government and opposition have responded, whether this movement represents something genuinely new in Indian politics, and what it could mean for the future of the country's political landscape.
So, Sid, welcome to the other side of the Political Dispatch. Are you ready?
I'm already sweating.
All right. Well, let's start. I guess we'll kind of start a little bit slow, give us some of the background, but we'll start with the resignation that sparked today's conversation. So a minister in the Indian government has recently resigned, and we're recording this on July 30th for context for everyone. Who was this person and what political party were they a part of?
Yeah, so the minister who resigned was Dharmendra Pradhan, and he was the Minister of Education in the BJP government. So he resigned after intense protests that took place across the country, led by the youth of the country, the so-called Gen Z, across the country, especially in New Delhi, which was largely supported by a majority of the opposition parties.
Cool. And you referenced the opposition parties there in India. So excluding the Cockroach Party, who we're going to talk about in a bit, who are the sort of the main opposition parties?
Right. So the principal opposition party right now in India is the Indian National Congress, which has been in the opposition for the last 12 odd years so far. Apart from that, we have regional players like the Samajwadi Party. You also have the TMC and the DMK. These are the major players. AAP, which was the Aam Aadmi Party, used to be a major opposition party, but now has dwindled because of a lot of horse trading that has taken place.
Gotcha. So I guess this will be the biggest question because I want you to kind of walk us through all of the things that led up to all of this. But what were the main events that led to the minister's resignation?
No, it's a very interesting timeline of events, actually. So earlier in the year, the Honorable Chief Justice of India, the head of the Supreme Court of India, during a hearing said that unemployed youth in the country are like cockroaches and insects who feed off the system and who are not contributing to the system. That sparked a lot of the anger within the youth because India currently has a very high unemployment rate, especially among the youth and the educated youth. So even if you've studied in the most premier of educational institutions in India, it's very hard to find a job. And this, of course, caused waves in the media that, the Honorable Chief Justice has gone ahead and said these statements. And one man, Abhijit Deepke, who's a student in the United States and a former political worker here in India associated with the AAP, put out a tweet saying, "What if all the cockroaches got together?" And a couple of days later, he created an Instagram handle called the Cockroach Janta Party and immediately saw 5 million people following it. The rise was just spectacular. And when they saw that, even in his own words, when he was talking about it, even he didn't expect such a response from the youth of India. and it captured the nation's attention. And when it started reaching 10 million mark, and when the government banned their social media handles on Twitter and Instagram, that's when it became really serious that, okay, they've made the quintessential mistake of banning something which gives them legitimacy. And then the taunts from the government started that he's away, he's outside India, these are foreign powers trying to, disturb the peace and the unity and the diversity of India, and so on and so forth. He books a ticket, comes to India, and says that he's going to start campaigning against the education minister and is going to focus on educational reforms in India. He appoints three spokespersons, and then slowly begins to, in mid-June, is when he starts aligning with a social activist called Sonam Wangchuk, who sat on a hunger strike along with the CJP. That hunger strike lasted for approximately 28 days in the designated spot for protests in New Delhi, which is Jantar Mantar. I've been there for multiple protests, so I know exactly how the layout is and how the experience must have been for a lot of the youth who were attending their first set of protests. Hunger strikes in general begin to take traction once they cross the 7 to 8 day mark, when the government still refuses to engage with the said party in this case. And soon it became like a regular feature in mainstream news media and also on social media because it was a youth-led movement. Soon enough, you had smaller opposition parties supporting and urging Sonam Wangchuk to end his fast, or like checking on their well-being. A few handful celebrities who kind of stood out for their vocal nature against the establishment across the years also came in to support. I think it was roughly around the time of 15th July when the movement was gaining a lot of traction. When they crossed the 21-day mark, you started seeing a lot of social media posts saying the longest fast that Mahatma Gandhi did was about 21 days, and Sonam Wangchuk has just entered the 22nd day. So it got the nation's attention, it got the youth's attention, it got the Gen Z's attention that the government doesn't care. The man is fasting for 22 days, and they still haven't reached out to them. And soon enough, you had a lot of regional opposition parties like the TMC and the AAP and the DMK kind of reach out, and a host of others, of course, as well, reach out to Cockroach Janta Party, meet them, talk to them, all wanted to ride the wave, except the Indian National Congress. The Indian National Congress sent emissaries to go ahead and meet them, but the leadership did not directly engage with the CJP. I will explain later in the episode as to why they didn't do it. But as the public sentiment started growing and as the number of people who started joining the protests reached the 1,000-figure mark, the government, of course, was panicking as to how they need to respond to this. Because in the past, any protest or anti-government stance that has been taken has always been painted as you're anti-nationals, you've been subfunded by Pakistan, you are unaware, and you are here to break India's democracy. In this case, there are a bunch of kids, I call them kids, but they're 21-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 22-year-olds. What do you say to them, right? How do you change the narrative in such a scenario? So the government just didn't know what to do. They went with the usual propaganda, but the youth didn't have it. And on 20th of July, which is a pivotal day in the protest, is when the police took action against the protesters and the protests turned violent. What sparked the violence is yet to be known, but from ground reports, which I followed very closely, it's the police that started with tear gas shelling and then started beating the kids with sticks, which are made out of either cane or fiberglass. Now, that's a common practice in Indian law enforcement. However, there are lots of reports and lots of videos where the police used semi-lethal force, such as pellet guns, which can blind and disable people quite severely. And they also used sticks which had long nails in them. And the brutal imagery that resulted out of this, of course, sparked outrage on social media across the country and across the world. That's when the movement just went completely viral and beyond the original idea that, hey, this is just not a movement to revamp the government, the education reforms. This is, the people of India kind of taking a stance against the government of India at this point in time. In the meantime, the government sent police force to take away Sonam Wangchuk, who was on the 24th day of his hunger strike at that point in time, and in a mafioso kind of a style, and took him to a hospital, saying that the courts had ordered them to look after his well-being. The way they did it was quite shocking. They basically bought white blankets and covered up all cameras, disabled the internet in that zone, and then they took him away, not in a gurney, but in a blanket. And that imagery is, of course, there, and it went viral as well. Following this, of course, the next day was 20th of July when the violence took place. And on the 21st of July, Indian National Congress is when it was the first day of Parliament session. And that's when they decided to go ahead and act, because it would have been a two-pronged attack against the government. And they went ahead and protested outside the Prime Minister's residence. It was either a day or the day after, against the violence that was committed against the students. And as expected, the government dragged away the leader of opposition, literally picked him up and threw him in a bus and took them to a far-off police station, and then took them to a stadium in a holding area. That amplified the movement substantially, because it kind of it made the government alone. The opposition could not be criticized anymore for anything. And the opposition took a very principled stance. And so the government was clearly on a massive back foot. As the protests increased and the police was withdrawn, negotiations began between the CJP, that's the Cockroach Janta Party, and the government, between two ministers of the government and two emissaries from the CJP. They had 3 rounds of conversations, and finally the government had to relent, and they announced the resignation in the weekend, not during parliament hours. They announced the resignation of the minister. And the resignation itself was, if you read the tweet that the minister put out, it's like a dig at the opposition to try and say that, the foreign forces are still trying to, destabilize the country and so on. And that's what happened. And, a very important thing that took place in between, just a day before the minister resigned, was a cabinet meeting took place, which was led by the Prime Minister Modi. And the outcome of the cabinet meeting was that it was supposed to be focusing on educational reforms, but the outcome was that they need to focus more on engaging with the youth, and they need to put out Instagram videos a lot more and use Gen Z lingo. So yeah, that's a small nutshell of events that took place. And this is the first time that the public has forced a minister in this government's tenure since the last 12 years to resign. It's a major victory, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big moment. I suppose, like for, say, British listeners who are used to cabinet ministers resigning every 5 minutes, might not mean that much when a minister resigns. But as you say, in India, it's sort of like quite a big moment for this government that's been in power for a long time. I was going to ask about, who formed the Cockroach Party, but it'd be interesting, just briefly, you mentioned there about the media. What's their sort of slant been on the protests, if there has been a slant? What's sort of the messaging that's come out from the main parts of the media?
Well, the mainstream media is completely for the government. So they will not toe the line that has been set by the government. So their approach to this entire movement has been that these people are unaware, they've been misled by the opposition, they're funded by George Soros, the usual rhetoric that we hear, that we've grown up hearing. And also calling a lot of the private education system people who run YouTube channels, who educate the youth and empower them, calling them instigators of, the movement and so on and so forth. And a lot of bad mouthing, ad hominem attacks, and so on and so forth, praising the government, praising Modi, praising BJP. The independent media was at the protests and was there kind of highlighting the stories of the youth that are protesting, why they're protesting, what are their motivations, hearing their stories, and so on. So there was a very stark difference in the stance that was taken. And I think a lot of the YouTube and the Instagram journalists who were there, the independent news creators, as we call them these days, they were also there who were reporting and providing real-time updates round the clock, even 3 a.m. at night, 4 a.m. at night, and so on. And that's pretty much what enabled a lot of authentic updates to kind of come out. Interestingly, when the mainstream media went to cover the protests, they were heckled. Every single mainstream media in India is called Godi media, which means lapdog media. It's a play on Modi. So lapdog media was heckled relentlessly. So every time they would stand and they would try and, record a news bite, they would be surrounded by hundreds of protesters who would, heckle them and tell them to get out. And that happened across the country, which was quite fascinating.
So who formed the Cockroach Party? I know you've made references to some of the people involved.
Yeah.
You've mentioned how it started to grow. And I guess now, like, what's the size of it? What's sort of like you talked about 5 million followers in a very short space of time. So who formed the party? Who are the main players? And then how big is it?
The founder is Abhijit Deepke, who was a former social media worker for the Aam Aadmi Party, the AAP. He left about 3 or 4 years ago, and he wanted to focus on his own life. So he went and applied for a master's program in the US. Mind you, this is not an official political party. It's not been registered with the Election Commission of India. They have no plans to fight elections. They just called it that because A, they were called the cockroaches. B, they wanted to play on, the ruling party's name, which was Bharatiya Janta Party. So they were like, we're CJP, like I mentioned, what started off as 5 million followers in 24 hours, they are now at 22 million last I checked, which is higher than the principal opposition party, which is Congress, at 15 million, and the ruling party at 9 million. So as a ideology, I think it really captured the youth. And unlike a lot of political leaders who have a lot of bots, like Modi has a lot of bots as followers, he can't be as popular as Kim Kardashian, to be honest. But he has 105 million followers. These are authentic followers who are there, who are engaging, who are responding, and who defeated the government through memes and reels.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, definitely. I think my question, because I was going to ask about kind of the government's response, but I feel like you kind of walked us through their backlash to it, I guess. But I'm really interested in their role into the future. If we can, in this moment, kind of like tell us how it stands. And again, July 30th, 2026. So this is kind of ongoing, but what do you think is actually going to happen with all of this?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of points which I wanted to add on what the government's trying to do, what the opposition's saying, and then I'll kind of come to what the movement looks like. Now the ball is in the parliament, right? It's in the government's court to act on what they have said and what they agreed to. So they agreed to 3 demands. First was the resignation of the minister. Second was to withdraw all police cases against the protesters. And third was to announce compensation to 20 plus young students who took their lives because the NEET exam, was leaked multiple times and they lost years in their preparation for that. So the government is dilly-dallying on those demands at this point of time, apart from the resignation. They've set up a empowered committee, so to speak, with a bunch of experts from various fields. The composition of that committee has also been criticized by the opposition because they lack actual educational intellectuals and civil society members. And the opposition basically wants to have a debate on the violence that was committed and to try and hold the government to account because it's the Home Minister who is the only one who can authorize lethal action, such as pellet guns and so on and so forth. But the government refuses to debate on it and they stonewall them. And their approach is to establish fast-track courts, which would give long-term punishments to anybody who leaks papers. But that's not really the solution that the CJP or the Congress were looking for. And the CJP is being pretty vocal about it. So what does the CJP do now? I think they'll be there as watchdogs to hold the government to account. They've repeatedly said that if you don't live up to the agreement that we came to in good faith. We'll be back on the streets, and the protests will continue, and there's going to be massive protests, much bigger than anything that you've ever seen. I think what it has ignited, as not just as a movement, but as as a sentiment across the country, is that this government evaded accountability for a very long time, and it's the youth that held them to account, at least on one thing, and that they can go ahead and do that again and again in an irreverent fashion, which has basically prompted why the BJP leaders are now doing and using words like YOLO, we didn't clock it, all the so-called Gen Z lingo, that they're going to influence the new generation by doing that, and, doing up-close selfie videos on Instagram. I mean, it's a joke.
That keeps coming back to our political dispatch episodes. Tom, what does this mean?
Exceptional. It's great. Know what it means?
For anyone that is listening, obviously, to this, we're doing like the clock it thing, the little fingers tapping.
Yeah.
I've talked about this at least 3 times now, which is hilarious, but that was a really good example. Thank you, Sid.
Yeah, thank you. Just YOLO isn't a Gen Z term, though, is it?
I think it's a millennial term. I just showed my age there, so
Yeah.
Politicians did too. So yeah.
Yeah, I find it hilarious that it's like a government response is, let's not do anything about it. Let's just appear to sound more connected. Is like the most out of touch thing you could possibly do.
You'd be surprised, Tom, that this is actually going to be a very effective way of building a new narrative and distracting the people. The BJP has a very loyal voter base. It does have a very loyal voter base, and it has a very radicalized voter base, which will vote for them come what may. It will hold the opposition accountable for all of the government's failures. And I'm part of many WhatsApp groups with families, friends. I have people in my own family who do that. So it's still going to work. It is going to work, because they're like, oh, he's so cool. Look, he's pivoted. Oh, he's changed the way he's doing things. Even in our generation, like the millennials, there are tons of them, even in this country, who support him. So it's not surprising, and I won't be surprised if it works. But this is when the opposition parties, the Congress primarily, which has been really hot-footing it since the movement has taken place, to not let go of the government in terms of accountability. And that's been really good to see that, because the opposition in India has been handicapped like no other opposition has ever been, or I have read about across the world, in a so-called democracy. Let me caveat that, right? So when they're actually able to connect with the masses out there at a crucial juncture, which is like the halfway point of the third term, this is going to be very important. And a lot of the millennials who were supporting the Gen Z protests said that you've done your bit and you've done a great job in holding this government to account. Now your job is to go ahead and create a voter ID and make sure you vote properly when the time comes in 2029. So the roadmap for the youth has been laid out. They will step up this time. So you will see an uptick in voter turnout, in 2029. And I can't wait for that day.
That sort of links quite nicely, actually, to that final question, which Lily alluded to in her previous question. But what's the future in terms of what's the Cockroach Party's future in Indian democracy? As you say, it's not actually a political party. Are movements like this a genuine threat to the political elite, or is it more like a wake-up call to the opposition?
When you say political elite, do you mean the ruling elite?
Yeah, the ruling elite. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a genuine threat to the ruling party. It is, because, like I mentioned earlier, it's very hard to paint them as anything apart from students who are protesting. So their usual playbook is not going to function here. But it would be very interesting if they get into politics, if they decide to contest elections. I'm not really sure how that would turn out, but even if they win 1 or 2 seats, it would be a phenomenal achievement, I would say. I think their movement is only going to galvanize the opposition. This movement has just helped the opposition substantially, and which is great because they are the custodians of accountability in this country, not the government. So it should really benefit the opposition. And if they're playing their cards right, touch wood, if they continue to play their cards right, we'll have a new government, a new coalition in 2029.
I mean, I think that's a really, really good take as well I think we're seeing young people around the world in a lot of different democracies who have just been, for lack of a better term, screwed over for the last, 5-10 years, depending on what we're counting as young and kind of when they became politically sentient as well, when they got interested in politics. We've seen a lot of young people who have just seen oppression and just been frustrated because now there's nothing for us because of all of that corruption and oppression. They're angry, so I hope that anger turns into voting. I hope that it turns into showing up polls, because that's the way to make genuine change in these systems. But I think we're lots of young people that are very similar in that sentiment for different reasons in their countries,
I just want to add here, there have been multiple Gen Z protests that have happened in South Asia over the last 2-3 years. So you had in Sri Lanka first, the government fell. Then you had in Nepal, the government fell. Then you had in Bangladesh, the government fell. These Gen Z protests were different in India. They were not to overthrow the government. They were only for reforms. And they exercised what, the Indian democracy actually tells them to do, is to protest and hold the government to account and protest for reforms. And everybody goes back to what Mahatma Gandhi did back in the 1920s. It's the hunger strike. It's the non-violent strike. It's the speak truths to power positions. And we've had such strikes before in the country. And majority of them, which have gained national level prominence, have succeeded. So what it has done for the younger generation, the Gen Z, the mid-20s, the late teens guys, is that they've realized that politics is cool, and that they can affect a change. And it's not like, what is one movement going to do? They've seen the change that's happened. And for them, the bare minimum is not basic electricity, having food rations available. It's about having access to good opportunities, good education, ease of doing business, and unregulated free speech. And when it hits these things, that's when, they stepped out onto the streets. So I hope it serves as an inspiration to a lot of the student protests happening across the world. And we see a tide slowly changing the ruling elite and making them realize that, democracy wins. It takes time, but it'll always win.
Yeah, that's the mic drop moment. So I don't need to add anything onto that, I think.
Yeah, clap it.
Talking it. Yeah.
Okay, well, that was the mic drop moment. So I think that we can close out this episode because I have nothing to add to that. I think that was a wonderful tying it all together. And again, ending on a positive note on a political dispatch episode, which is amazing. But Sid, thank you so much for talking us through all of this today. Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts. It's been so interesting to hear your perspective on it, and from someone who has been following this live. And also, you just gave such a wonderful background to all of it, the historical context, but also the present. I just really enjoyed. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure, guys. This was a great way to kind of cover India. And I think there should be more future episodes this way.
I agree.
Cool. So we hope you enjoyed the episode. Let us know what you think in the comments. Leave us a rating and share this episode with your friends, family, classmates, and colleagues.
This has been a Be the Change Media Network production. I'm Lily Mott.
I'm Tom Spare.
And I'm Sid Kurapati. You've been listening to The Political Dispatch.